like any field, and especially any science field, fitness is always evolving. I describe going into a fitness center today is much like going into an automotive shop today, or an automotive repair place, where they've got everything's gotten very technical, everything's gotten very sophisticated because of what we know about automobiles now, and the equipment has gotten very technical. It's gotten very different. It takes a lot more education to actually learn how to do the diagnostics and what have you. Well, fitness is much the same way. With the advancements of the field, comes advancements of the equipment, and everything gets much more difficult as far as putting together workouts and understanding how to actually make the best of your time in a fitness facility, which is why we always hire individuals that have a degree in the field. But what are those degrees and what do they mean? What are the different exercise degrees and what do they learn when they're actually studying that today on the Personalized Fitness Podcast? Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personal Edge Fitness. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast, and thank you if you've been following us. I'd highly recommend you please ask that you like and follow the podcast, share it with others if possible. All about dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness. Now, before we dive into talking about my topic today, which it happens to be breaking down the different degrees and the different educational degrees associated with exercise and fitness and the ones that we use here at the facility, I want to tell you how to get in touch with the podcast if you have any questions for us. Please reach out to us at area code 251-278-3343 or 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. Of course, my email address, personaledgefitness.com is our website. Personal Edge Fitness is our Facebook page. Hit me up on X at Team PE if you are so inclined. I came up with the idea of this podcast after having Dr. Kathy Fuller on our podcast last week. I hope you caught that. So enjoyed having her back in town and actually sprung it on her last minute to be a guest on the podcast. But we are very blessed with a relationship with several many people in the health and wellness field. Very, very, very talented, highly educated individuals. I've had several of them on the podcast. We've got and not only have I had several on the podcast, but hiring our trainers over the years, since we've been in business for 24 years, we've had some incredibly talented staff members, highly educated staff members, like we do now on the staff with several degrees. I forget how many master's degrees we've got on staff, but definitely, as you know, we don't hire anybody that doesn't have at least an undergraduate degree in the field. And even our interns, our contract intern right now is a senior and completing his degree in kinesiology at the University of Mobile. And our summer intern, who is a freshman in kinesiology at University of Auburn. And so Auburn University, excuse me. So we always require that. I was so glad to have Dr. Fuller on because Dr. Fuller was not only the most, on paper, definitely educated and qualified staff member we've ever had because she has a PhD in kinesiology, but she was with us for 12 years and was a trainer with us for 12 years and is now head of a kinesiology department at Regents College in Massachusetts. But it made me think about, I throw these words out all the time. I do it in my consult. I do it in my elevator speech. We have for our 24-year history, every single one of our staff members have possessed, at minimum, a bachelor's degree in the field of either exercise science, exercise physiology, kinesiology, sport medicine, or athletic training. And I thought about it. Do you really know what those fields are? And I say them all the time. They're probably words you've heard before, but exactly what are they? I mean, they're impressive. They sound really good, and they have to tell you, in a consult, it sells very well. But what are they? Is there really some substance there? And why do we require them? And are there what's the difference between that and a certification? And we talk about you hear the phrase certified personal trainer. I'm sure that's something you've heard if you've been around the fitness field for any amount of time. You've heard certified personal trainer, and the reason you don't hear licensed personal trainer, like you hear licensed massage therapist, licensed physical therapist, licensed occupational therapist. Our field is an unlicensed field, and I've said that many times. It is not regulated. We don't have to have a license to do what we do, and that's good and bad. Bad, as you've heard me say many times, because good, you heard me say many times that I'm not a big fan of the government being involved in anything I do, but bad because yeah, pretty much any Tom, Dick, or Harry can call themselves a personal trainer, and many do, and that makes it, as far as I'm concerned, it makes it dangerous, and you'll see why as I go through what these degrees entail and the education that are behind the individuals that are our instructors here at Personalized Fitness, and because of how complicated the field has gotten, and what is being advertised that personal trainers can do, and how they can help you. And a lot of that is gone away. It's not gone away. We're still doing a lot of weight loss. 72% of the people come to us for general fitness and weight loss. But this field has branched heavily into the rehab field, and that's where that gets very technical. It's very hard for me to understand how you can learn all of what we work with. We have a podcast coming up in a few weeks. We're going to do it with Gary Zakutny, who's our head of our rehab side of it, our sport medicine side, and we're actually going to go over the many afflictions, rehabilitations, disabilities that we've dealt with, and I think you're going to be amazed to see what we've worked with. And it's hard for me to understand how somebody that has a weekend certification could actually handle that when you're up against the background that, especially compared to the background that our staff has. So we're going to actually go over some of those disciplines right now, starting with mine, which happens to be exercise science. And exercise science is even this field has evolved. And you'll see it's actually evolved, and since I've been in practice, has evolved. They've gotten even more technical with that degree over the years. Even in my practice, you'll see what I mean. But exercise science, it emerged as a formal academic discipline in the mid 20th century. This is, if you think about mid 20th century. Well, that's after it's right around the time that Dr. Ken Cooper wrote his very famous book, Aerobics, which I say basically launched the fitness revolution, and started his studies on aging. And this is where he started finding out that, hey, that fitness is something we should not only be considering, but really should make a part of our lives. And that was all started with that book. There were some practitioners prior to. I mean, the Olympics date back farther than that. But as far as exercise as medicine, exercise as the way to actually take care of yourself, and I watched the evolution go from an alternative medicine, which I think is absurd, to no, this is actually medicine. This is actually what we should be doing. In fact, if you listen to, as I have, my wife was a drug rep for many years. If you listen to the presenters at the different talks the drug reps put on, the majority of the drugs, when they actually get to their presentation and talk about the particular affliction, whether it's high blood pressure, or high cholesterol, or whatever, they come up, they'll list the treatments, and the number one treatment is always diet and exercise. And so exercise science started in the mid 20th century, and this is when we started going, okay, wait a minute, we need to put some time into researching this and actually develop a system of actually teaching people about how to do exercise. But it reflected a growth in interest in the scientific principles underlying physical activity and health. And it encompasses a broad range of topics, including anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, and nutrition. And biomechanics is basically the study of the movement of the body. How does the body move? And anatomy is basically understanding what the muscles are. You have a lot of practitioners of fitness, whether they are exercisers themselves, or whether they are self-professed personal trainers that know a lot of exercises and have seen a lot of exercise programs. But it's quite, at times, funny. It's quite scary to me when I actually speak to some of these individuals and ask them, well, what's your workout? Either what is the workout that you're prescribing for people or what is the workout you do yourself. And they'll list a bunch of exercises. And I'll say, okay, well, what are you working with that exercise? And it's amazing to me how not only practitioners of it, the people that are actually doing the workouts, they're surprised that they really don't know what muscles they're working. But even scarier, they're trainers that have no idea what muscles they're working or what that muscle does, what the simple movement of that muscle does. So first thing, understanding anatomy is incredibly important. Knowing that, I'm working the chest. What is the chest? Well, it's the pectoralis major, pectoralis minor. What does it actually do? And then knowing not just the shoulder muscle, but the deltoid, then the deeper muscles, which are the infraspinatus, the supraspinatus, the ones that make up the rotator cuff. That can go on for days about that. A lot of people know the quadricep, but do you know all the muscles around it? Do you know that, that people know abdominals, but when you're moving your legs, then you know that the iliopsoas is involved. The understanding the basic anatomy, knowing what those muscles are, is first very important. And then physiology. And the physiology is the mechanics of that muscle. What does that muscle do? What does the pectoralis major do? And if you think about exercises for the chest or exercises for the pectoralis major, you're going to think of pressing exercises. You're going to think of the push-up. You're going to think of chest press. But many people also, those that know, are going to think of course, the chest fly. Well, if you look at the chest fly and the mechanics of a chest fly movement, it's very different than a pressing movement. Well, how are you working the chest doing both of those movements? Well, you got to understand first and foremost what the chest does. The chest actually adducts the arm. It brings the arm towards the center line of the body. And it controls the arm going away, as in it's an eccentric traction. It doesn't pull the arm away, but it somewhat controls if you have a weight in your hand and you're lowering the weight, it's going to control that lowering part of the motion. Well, that's why a fly motion is one of the most pure ways of working the chest, because a fly motion is adducting or bringing the arm into the center line of the body. And so that's physiology. That's understanding physiology. Biomechanics, same thing. How are those different muscle groups working together? You can understand a leg extension, extending your knee and then lowering your foot back down. That's a quadricep exercise, and you understand that. But how does that work in conjunction with the gluteal muscles, the calf muscles, the hamstring muscles when you go to walk or run? And that's the study of biomechanics. And then, of course, the nutrition and beginnings of exercise science actually had nutrition. And even some of the earlier programs that predated me, the first exercise physiologist that I knew personally was back in 1981. And he actually spoke to me about nutrition. And no, we're not dietitians, and I say that many times. In fact, it's in my elevator speech about myself. I'm not a dietitian, nor do I play one on TV. But there was, even in this gentleman's education, he had basic nutrition. And we were starting to understand the link at that time, even in the mid-20th century, early 60s, 70s, we were starting to learn how nutrition played a part of exercise. And as you'll see, it advances. It really advances from there. I want to address certifications because I do think certifications are important, because there's the different accreditation, and the certification is yet another way of testing you at the end of it. Do you really know what you're talking about? And do you know the safety precautions involved with that? During our education, we go over that a lot, but a lot of certifications cover safety, and extremely important. And I think having a certification on top of the education is extremely important. That's in many fields. Physicians have to pass boards to be a practicing physician, and that I know of. I think they can practice without actually passing the boards. But most every physician you know of is a board certified physician. I know of a practice that had a physician that was practicing, and they required them to pass the boards. They never passed the boards, so they had to actually ask them to leave the practice. So it's much like that. And almost every single field has that, and exercise has it. Now, exercise. As I see, personal training is not a licensed field, so a certification is not required. But there are tons of different certifications out there. Actually, I could make one up right now and say you're Garrett Williamson certified. But so we don't accept those certifications. We don't accept the weekend certifications, as I call them, the ones that require no education whatsoever to sit for. There are certifications out there that actually require a degree in the field. And I like those, and the reason being they're the ones that have done if you look at those institutions that actually offer those certifications, they've been around a lot longer. They're the ones that most every other, NASM and all these other certifications you can get with not even a high school degree, they're all the scientific information that they use come from the organizations that have the certifications that I'm speaking of. American College of Sport Medicine is the gold standard. They literally wrote the book on exercise testing and guidelines. Their exercise testing and guideline book is required for study for this weekend certifications. And if not, all the information, all the science that they're basing their certifications off of are from the American College of Sport Medicine. The American College of Sport Medicine has a certification. It has several certifications. One of them it has is a certified exercise physiologist. This has changed names a couple of times. They have a clinical exercise physiologist, and the certified exercise physiologist is actually born out of what my certification is, which is ACSM, American College of Sport Medicine, HFI, Health Fitness Instructor. And they require a degree to actually sit for that exam. Now, this, like I said, this field evolved. And it evolved now. You still have exercise science programs out there, and they call them different things, but it evolved into exercise physiology. And the two now, because of the way most educational programs are offered, they may call it exercise science, but it actually has the components of exercise physiology. But the exercise physiology is actually an evolution of what we've learned after establishing the exercise science field. It is a specialized branch, basically, of exercise science, focusing specifically on the physiological responses and adaptations to exercise. The basics of exercise science, we're teaching about exercise themselves. Physiology started getting into the actual responses that we were seeing. In other words, research had been done. Time had passed. We'd done a lot of research, and we learned about, okay, now we've got people that are exercising. This is when we found out about overuse injuries. When people thought, well, like we do with a lot of times with any kind of medicine, we think, well, some is good. Well, it's human nature. A lot of people think that more is better. And so I had a lot of practitioners of clients, for that matter, that came to us, the older generation, and they had been exercisers, and their modus operandi was, we do this every day. And it took me a long time to teach them to know, we've learned you don't do this every day. You don't. And when I say every day, you're not going to fully break down a chest muscle and then turn around and fully break down a chest muscle again the next day within 24 hours. You're not going to do that. You're gonna have a rest and recovery, because we understood physiology, which was, again, the adaptive responses to exercise. Physiology, the coursework involved in that, advanced exercise physiology. You had basic exercise physiology and exercise science, but these are much more advanced. These are basically based on these studies that I'm talking about, which are always going on. They're going on right now. Thank God. We're still learning more and more about it. I've actually said it on the podcast before, which I believe that we're doing a lot of research on recovery right now, and I fully believe, and again, Garrett's opinion, but we've been able to speed up recovery. And I think that we will eventually learn so much about recovery and how the body responds to it that we will be able to fully recover the body within 24 hours and do another workout the next day. And so you're moving forward even faster. That hasn't happened, but I believe we're getting to that point. Cardiovascular physiology. This is something, again, this was very popular when I was in school, and especially when I was getting my master's degree. Cardiovascular cardiac rehab became a thing. In fact, at that time, a lot of professors were training their students and really pushing them towards cardiac rehab, which is a huge field. But it didn't start until really didn't become big until the 80s. It started earlier than that, because Ken Cooper's studies actually kind of led to that in the late 60s and in the 70s. But 80 became huge. 80s became really huge. I was actually in a large medical facility, the St. John's Medical Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. and their Siegfried Health Center, and they were just beginning back in '93. We're just beginning a cardiac rehab program. So cardiovascular physiology is part of the exercise physiology curriculum. Metabolic responses to exercise. This is taking it a step further as far as the nutrition side. Understanding the metabolic, exactly what are the needs. This is when we started learning about the needs of making sure you had enough calories, and the second thing, making sure you had enough protein. And we understood that, you can break down the muscle and you'll lose weight and you'll look slimmer, but are you really building it back? And what are the actual metabolic responses to it? How much protein do we need? These kind of things. That's when clinical exercise testing became very prevalent. There were times in hospital-based facilities wouldn't allow somebody to work out until they'd been through at least a submax test. I can remember early on in two of my internships where we were doing forced vital capacity (FVCs), and we were basically measuring lung capacity. This was testing that we had learned over the years that was a good indicator of fitness. So, doing body fat measurements, we were doing circumference measurements. We were learning to ignore BMI, which is a waste of time. Don't ever listen to anybody talk to you about BMI. If they're measuring BMI, please give us a call. We'll give you the actual measurement because BMI is just a guess. And then at that time, we started studying in exercise physiology. Started studying the research methods, which were very important. We learned back in the late '80s, early '90s, about some exercise that was a very famous test that was done on eccentric contractions. Eccentric contractions are when you're lowering the weight, when the weight is going back to rest. If you're doing a pull-up, an eccentric contraction is the part where you're lowering yourself down. When you're doing a bench press, is when you're pushing the weight, lowering the weight back down, is the eccentric contraction. There was a very famous study about eccentric contractions, and actually somebody died during the study. And so understanding the practices and research methods were very important because we were training the next generation of clinical exercise physiologists. These are the people that are doing the research that we're getting the information from. Certifications for that, again, another one, ACSM. ACSM has a certified clinical exercise physiologist, and that's a certification strictly for exercise physiology. Then that field evolved even more, evolved in kinesiology. And this is what I love about it is the fact that, and I want people to understand, is this is a science. It's ever changing. And so we are continually, even continually developing the degrees. I've seen, I'm an ACICS evaluator, and that's a American Council of Independent Schools and Colleges, Accrediting Council of Independent Schools and Colleges, and that is every single university, every single school program out there that has undergraduate and graduate degrees that are recognized have to have an accrediting agency. The agency actually goes into the school and does an evaluation of the programs to see whether or not they're accredited. And if they're not accredited, they can't get loans, they can't get student loans, and basically it's not a recognized degree. SACS is the accrediting council for South Alabama, for University of Mobile, for United States Sports Academy. ACICS happens to be Independent Schools and Colleges. And I've been evaluated for them for several years, and I would look at different curriculums, and I would see the evolution of the curriculums. It was amazing to me how they were evolving. Kinesiology is yet another evolvement. Kinesiology is derived from the Greek word kinesis, which means movement. It began as a formal study in the early 20th centuries, integrating aspects of biology, anatomy, psychology, to understand human movement. Nothing works without the brain. I don't know if you think about Washington, maybe that may be the exception to the rule. But nothing works without the brain. Human movement does not take place without the brain to be involved. That is where you actually get the communication through the nerves to send it to the muscle, to tell the muscle to move, or to stop, or whatever. And so we started researching and understanding the psychology of it. In kinesiology, major coursework, motor control and learning. Basically, motor control, that starts in the brain. And so motor control was biomechanics of human movement. Again, this is an advancement of basic biomechanics. Exercise and sport psychology. Very important. We tell people all the time here that first and foremost, all of our fitness is based on what I've talked about before, which is live age, and there's no such thing as the live age. There's no such thing as the time passing on a calendar causing deterioration. There is such thing as the lie of age. The lie of age is the ridiculous concept that time passing on a calendar actually causes deterioration. It's not true. It's an absolute lie. Anybody telling you that's lying to you. It is actually controlled. Your ability is controlled by 4 simple things. I've said it many times: fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, and the most important, which is mindset. And this is where we started actually adding the mindset, the mind, the psychology of exercise. And of course, the neural basis, even going farther in the kinesiology study, neural basis of movement. This is when we found out that balance isn't just, something that you lose because time passes on a calendar, or you got a weakness in your leg, that's why you're in balance. No, actually, is your cerebral cortex not the cerebral cortex, your cerebellum being stimulated, like it was when you were playing sports. If it's not being stimulated now, then your balance is going to be off. The neural pathways aren't going to be developed. They're going to deteriorate. You can develop again, but they're going to deteriorate. This is where kinesiology, we started to actually study all this. So the certifications associated with it, really associated with kinesiology, and this certification somewhat predates kinesiology, or actually the when we started doing that as a degree. But the gold standard I feel is American College of Sport Medicine, because they actually provide the information for all the research, for all those certifications. But one of the best, and it's been up there, I'll put it up there with ACSM, and a lot of people will say, no, NSCA is higher than ACSM. Hey, that's fine. Both of them are fantastic. But the National Strength and Conditioning Association, which has been around for 50 years plus, has a NSCA Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist. This is known as CSCS. And it is one of the hardest certifications to get, and it's one of the best certifications. And again, a certification you can't get unless you have a degree in the field. The other 2 degrees, now that covers exercise. That's where we are: exercise science, exercise physiology, and kinesiology. We take it a step further, because we do a lot of rehab work, and I urge you to stay tuned. In a few podcasts, we're going to have Gary Zakutny on, who's head of our athletic training and head of our rehab, and we're going to talk about all the different disabilities that we have worked with, and all the different injuries and what have you that we've worked with in the past. You can be amazed at what we've worked with, and even forget about certified personal trainers. Even exercise science, exercise physiologists, kinesiologists know a lot about rehab, but really to take it to the next level, you're going to have to go into athletic training and sport medicine. And that's why we've been hiring athletic trainers and sport medicine professionals since 2003. We just signed one. She was on a podcast not too long ago, Kaylee Burkett. And Kaylee's one of our athletic trainers. She was the female athletic trainer for female sports for track, volleyball, and I believe 1 or 2 others for Tulane University. And her background is in athletic training, because we do so much rehab work. Athletic training dates back to ancient Greece, but as a formal academic discipline, it gained prominence in the early 20th century. A lot of this stuff, if you look at it, right around early 20th century, because they were trying to worry about injuries. That's why athletic training was developed. Mid 20th century is because we started figuring, hey, exercise is a good thing to prevent these injuries. All around that same time is when they all came out. This focuses on injury prevention, diagnosis, and rehabilitations in athletic populations. Now, you would think, okay, so they just work with the athletes. Absolutely not. In fact, the large majority of the work that our athletic trainers do are with our general population. Coursework, injury prevention and care. Therapeutic interventions. They basically, okay, now we got an injury. What do we need to do as far as therapy for it? Do we need to ice it? Do we need to heat it? Do we need to stretch it? Do we need to use some kind of a therapeutic gun, a Theragun on them or whatever? This is what they study. Clinical evaluations and diagnosis. They can actually, in a typical athletic training situation, they're not allowed to do diagnosis. They can do evaluations. They have to work under a physical therapist's care or a physician's care, so they don't actually do the diagnosis. As a personal trainer, they can actually do diagnosis. And so they actually will have people have an injury, and they'll come in to see us to see what's wrong with it. And many times they've been referred to, whoa, okay, wait a second, this this is an ACL tear. I know that's what it is, and we'll send them to an orthopedic surgeon, or something more advanced that we don't do here. But several times it's a pulled muscle. It's something we can do. They can actually prescribe a rehabilitation schedule. They're actually trained to do a lot more than we do here at the facility because it's illegal. They're trained in ultrasound. They're trained in E-stim. And as a personal trainer, unless they were working under physician's care or under physical therapist care, the athletic trainer actually can't do those things. So we don't play outside the lines. But there's a lot that we can do up until then, and even so much for even to go into the drug interventions of it. And you'll hear about that in a minute. But the certification that goes along with that is commonly known as a BOC. Now, to the athletic training field is different. It's licensed. It is a licensed field. In order for them to do a traditional athletic training role, which is working on the sidelines of a professional of a athletic team, professional, high school, college, working in a physical therapist office, and actually doing rehab work prescribed by the physical therapist. They have to be licensed. A licensure is not required for them to be a personal trainer, but our athletic trainers do maintain their licenses because they still do a lot of rehab work on the field. And that one is known as BOC, and that's actually put out by the National Athletic Training Association. Wonderful organization. I always say is the god of national athletic training, but really one of the foremost individuals involved in athletic training happens to be Dr. R.T. Floyd, who's out of University of West Alabama. And most athletic trainers know who that is, whether they've been even in the state of Alabama before. He literally wrote the book on it. He's a fantastic. I've had a couple of occasions to speak to him, and brilliant individual. But he's was head of the NATA at one time. I'm still sure he's still even on the board. But National Athletic Training Association has the Board of Certification, or BOC, and both of our current athletic trainers have those. The other one is and I threw sport medicine in there, and the reason I threw sport medicine in there, most degrees aren't degrees in athletic training. The older are in sport medicine anymore. Now they're athletic training degrees, and actually the athletic training, the NATA has required the athletic trainer to go to a graduate level program. And so they don't offer they have an undergrad in athletic training, but you can't be an athletic trainer now coming out of school. You can't sit for the BOC unless you have your graduate degree. And so, but the earlier degrees were known as sport medicine. And still, I believe there are some classifications of sport medicine. Our most talented athletic trainer has a sport medicine degree. And sport medicine, very similar. It emerged as a distinct field in the mid-20th century, integrating medical, scientific, and therapeutic principles to enhance athletic performance and manage sport-related injuries. Sport injury management is in the coursework. Exercise prescription for special populations is actually involved in sport medicine. Pharmacology in sport medicine. This is why many of our athletic trainers in the past, they can't prescribe medicine, but yeah, they understand the effects of an anti-inflammatory in healing process. And so, and actually make recommendations to our clientele about that. No, they don't prescribe, and they'll have to go through a pharmacist and a doctor for that, obviously, and thankfully. But they do understand because they've actually done the studies on how the pharmacology plays into it. And even advanced biomechanics and sports nutrition, because nutrition, we understand, is involved in the healing process as well as in the exercise process. So that again, the sport medicine degree in this field is the same as the athletic training. It is the BOC offered by the National Athletic Training National Athletic Training Association. I did want to point out something that was kind of interesting that exercise science, exercise physiology, kinesiology, these are typically exercise focused with some rehab. And but when you get to the athletic training and sport medicine, it's heavy rehab. And the whole reason we started hiring those individuals on our staff is because we have so many people that have a pre-existing condition or something that doesn't really, general fitness is fine for them, but it's something they need to be concerned with. And you live long enough and experience long enough, you're going to have an opportunity for injuring a leg, injuring a muscle, having a broken bone, what have you. We talk about it in our consults to find out what pre-existing conditions people may have. Even though they may tell us, well, it's no big deal, but I have this little knee thing, and I've always had it, and it's always going to be that way. Well, wait a second. Let's evaluate it. Let's see what's going on. And we can find a weakness, and we can actually help deal with that. We use our sport medicine and athletic trainers to do so. But I started this a second ago, but I did want to point out something kind of interesting, and that is the first university academy of graduate sport. In other words, classes that were dedicated to studying sport, studying exercise, and what have you. The first one that did graduate studies in that, master's degree level classes, and even doctorate level classes, was born out of the 1972 Munich Olympics, believe it or not. The gentleman who actually started the first academy of graduate sport went to the 1972 Olympics, and the U.S. team didn't fare very well. And he realized that there were just so many people uneducated about sport, about exercise, about developing. A lot of people that had coached, but they really didn't understand about developing athletes, and that happened to be the United States Sports Academy, which was founded shortly thereafter, and is located right here in South Alabama. And I'm very proud to say I'm a graduate of the United States Sports Academy, an alumnus there. And it was all focused, is all geared towards sport and what have you, and exercise. And there's several head coaches, several strength trainers. Sorry, my former guest on the podcast is wanting to add in a little bit. Steele, talking a bit during the podcast. My apologies, but there's several strength coaches that are graduates of the academy, and now in order to coach at the collegiate level and even be involved in strength training programs at the professional level, even those institutions have understood the education now, and they are requiring. They will not consider somebody for a strength coach unless they have a degree in the field. They understand the education behind it. Doesn't matter if they've played football all their life and now they're going to be a strength coach. They understand the science that has gotten involved, and they want people to know this science. One of the very famous graduates of the United States Sports Academy was Michael Leach. Sadly he's passed away, but the head coach of Mississippi State, and he actually, I don't think ever played the game of football, but he was very, very, very brilliant. But he needed to understand the mechanics of how everything works, so he actually got his graduate degree from the academy. And this is why you can understand why now we put so much an emphasis on education, and why that has been our brand. And I think it's boded well for us, and it's the reason why we train over 400 sessions a week. It's the reason why our average tenure of a client is 350% better than the national average, and it all goes to this incredible staff, which is the most qualified staff in the Southeast. Listen, if you had any questions about this, please reach out to me at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also contact me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. Personaledgefitness.com is our website. Personal Edge Fitness, our Facebook page. Hit me up on X at Team PE if you're so inclined. Being educated in the sport, being educated in exercise, having that background, having that knowledge, that is just one more way we help you reach a level of wellness. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time.